Are you acting like a 4-year-old child or are you acting like an adult? Let's talk about maturity models. First one we'll talk about is the Cert Resiliency Management Model. I would fully recommend that if you're interested in RMM, Cert has a great multi-day class on this. Take it. There's a reason it's a multi-day class. It's a very big topic. There are a lot of ins and outs with it, a lot of complexities associated with it, a lot of nuances associated with it as well. Go take the full-length class on it. It gives you a much better perspective on it as opposed to the 5-minute approach that we'll take in this block. But we try to give you an overview of some of the maturity models that are out there just for perspective. So Cert RMM is a maturity model for managing and improving operational resilience. This notion that resilient organizations can survive. They're like springs, right? You can contract, you can expand. These are the stressors of the organization, and it doesn't snap because the organization is resilient. So Cert RMM tries to guide the implementation and management of resilience activities across the life cycle of what you're trying to do. And it really merges security aspects, business continuity, disaster recovery, and IT operational activities. So traditionally, you look at those three areas and they're almost, 10, 15 years ago, they were very distinct. The security guys were over here, the IT guys were over here, and the business continuity guys were somewhere far away worrying about fires and floods. What RMM does is take those three disparate activities and bring them together and say, right where the three of these key areas merge, that is where we achieve resiliency. And so it brings those three areas together in this model and says this is how you can be a more resilient organization. So it defines maturity through various capability levels, and it's really intended to improve confidence in the organization's ability to manage that operational stress. Again, that spring extracting and expanding and contracting. If you can do that, you're theoretically a more resilient organization. And it should also inform security decisions, security requirements, continuity requirements, and even IT requirements as well. There was an adopter of the RMM from many years ago who said that RMM is really this extensive superset of things an organization could do to be more resilient. And that's really what it is. It's a set of activities or processes that you can do. So if you look at what RMM is based on, the foundation of RMM says that every organization has some type of mission. And this is it up in the upper right-hand corner there. Every organization has some type of mission. That mission dictates what services you are providing as an organization. So I've got a mission to do. I provide certain services to meet that mission. And then for every service, I have certain things that I need to do that service. There are certain activities that I have to do. And the four key components of RMM really focus on people, information, technology, and facilities. By people, we're talking about the human capital within the organization. Security personnel, HR, legal, just people in general. If you're in a business for whatever reason, people are one of your primary assets, right? Without people, you probably can't do your mission. So RMM says people is a key component of that. Information, data, records, knowledge in physical or digital form. This is important to an organization, and we want to protect it and make sure it's resilient as possible. By the same token, technology, these are your software and hardware systems, your servers, your actual network itself. And then one additional aspect of key assets that you use to provide your services to meet your organizational mission are facilities. So these are your offices, your data centers, the labs, the physical places that you perform these activities. And so all of these are the assets that are required to conduct your services to meet your organizational mission. And this is where RMM focuses, because it says take each of those assets, people, information, technology, and facilities, and be resilient with them. If you can do resilient activities around people to protect and sustain them, you're doing RMM. If, for your information, if you can protect the information and sustain it, you're doing RMM. And the same for technology and facilities. It's really about enabling resilience of those 4 key asset areas. RMM proposes 26 process areas across 4 different categories. The actual content in these is kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about. In fact, you wouldn't even have to memorize all of these particular sections. Just recognize the fact that RMM says you have engineering activities, enterprise management activities, process management activities, and operations activities. And within these activities, you can do things like asset definition and management, control management, incident management. And so it's a way of separating out the different activities that you have to do to be resilient into some sort of taxonomy. And this is what RMM provides. Semi-related to this, there's a system security engineering capability maturity model, and it uses the existing maturity model, capability maturity model approach, and just applies it to system security engineering. You might be thinking, well, that's obvious. You just called it the system security engineering capability maturity model. Well, it's called that for a reason. And so you have different stakeholders in here than you might have if you were doing a full RMM implementation. Because it's very focused on security engineering, you're now working with developers, integrators, system users, perhaps maybe different organizational assets. But you're looking at how do I rate the maturity of my ability to do system security engineering. And what you find with a model like this is every one of these owners or these stakeholders has to participate in the model and participate in the definition of that model, otherwise it fails. And it's not something you can do in a vacuum. Maintaining security architectures. Well, you'll find that as business needs change, technology changes, personnel changes out, threats change, everything is in constant flux. And you need a common set of metrics to be able to show that you are, or where you are, how mature you are, and define where you want to be as an organization. In fact, if you look at the relatively new NIST cybersecurity framework, that's one of the core tenets of the cybersecurity framework, is it says that there is a certain functional areas of identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. And you can define how mature, if you will, you want to be in each of those areas. And you measure how you currently are in those areas. And what that gives you is your current profile and your target profile. Currently, what do I look like from a maturity perspective in each of those functional areas? And from a target perspective, where do I want to be? Now that I have those defined, I can figure out what I need to do to get from current to target. And it's a way of mapping activities, allocating resources, and basically guiding the evolution of an organization in terms of improvement. So the maturity models help you figure out, where do I optimize on improving? Where are my resources best spent? So if you look at the actual CMM levels, there are 6 levels here, if you count 0. And so the state of your security process, or the state of your resiliency, or the state of actually whatever process you're trying to measure here, can be expressed in terms of these maturity model levels. If you're at maturity model level 0, you're not doing it. Not doing it at all, not even considering it. If you're at a maturity level 1, it means you are doing things in an ad hoc nature. So you might be doing it, but the risks associated with whatever it is that you're trying to manage may not be considered. There's no formal process for managing risk, and so your overall maturity level is a 1. Level 2 says repeatable but intuitive, meaning I have a good understanding of what the risks are, but when I sit down to do a risk assessment and I'm looking for how to do security in my organization, it's based on what's up here. If a bus were to hit me tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to do this process. And so that's maturity level 2. Maturity level 3 says, all right, well, we now have a defined process. So if Chris gets hit by a bus, then Bob can step in and take over this process for him. So we have a company-wide, documented, defined risk management policy or security construct here that we're building our security apparatus to. Level 4 is now managed and measurable, meaning that we have standard procedures in place, we have roles and responsibilities defined, we have our policies in place to do effective risk assessments, risk management, and build our security structure. What this means is that you can take any one of us, who are doing this process out, and the process will continue because there's a repeatable process to do it. And we're managing to that effort. And so we're measuring how well are we doing at this particular stage. We'll iterate, get a little better, and we'll say, okay, how well are we doing now? And so we're charting our process on the way from what we are now to what we want to be, and we're able to say, okay, we're here. We're not to the end yet, but we're getting there very slowly. And optimize, this is kind of the upper tier of maturity. And it says that we are monitoring our processes, we are managing our processes, and we are improving. We are continuously improving them and optimizing to get better at it. We're putting in automation. We're working with peer organizations on this. That's when you know you've reached kind of the upper tier of maturity levels in this, is because you're getting better at it and you're able to optimize on it. The capability maturity model for integration, again, this is focusing, taking the CMM that we just talked about, applying it to integration. And you have these 3 different constellations of development, acquisition, and services. And this is just a skeleton model that you can follow if you decide that this model is for you. And so in this model, there's a core set of processes, the Capability Maturity Model Foundation, or CMF. There are certain core process areas that you can follow, or activities that you can do. And these are considered the core, kind of at the center of those 3 different constellations that we talked about. Then, each constellation itself, acquisition, development, and services, has their own set of process areas. But first, the acquisition constellation is about how do you procure stuff within an organization. Development constellation is about how do we develop new products or services and rate the maturity of those processes. And then services constellation says, all right, how well do we deliver these services? How mature are we in that process? And like I said, each constellation has their own set of process areas. So in addition to the core, now you have 6 additional areas of activities that you can do. And it's all meant to look at how well do we do acquisition within the company. General Motors partnered with SCI to create the initial version of this, and if you think about it, it makes sense. What does General Motors do a lot of? Acquisition. They have a lot of suppliers, they have a lot of vendors that they deal with, and part of that integration of building new cars is acquisition. How do we get all this stuff in? And so the acquisition constellation has these additional 6 areas for activities to measure and rate your maturity level. Development, very similar to this, in that we have an additional 6 process areas for activities that we should look at in addition to the core. And this is focused really on engineering, development efforts, and the supporting efforts for those development and maintenance efforts. And the last one here is services. Within the services constellation, you're focusing on how well do you provide whatever it is that you do as an organization. And so you've got these 10 additional process areas here where you've got additional activities in addition to the core. If you're an organization that does acquisition, development, and services, then you're probably going to be looking at not only the core set of process areas, but all 3 constellation process areas as well to help you determine how mature your processes are in each of those areas. And finally, we'll talk about the operational lifecycle context. Recognize that a lot of the maturity models that are out there maybe focus on parts of the total operational lifecycle. RMM, and the reason it's so highly regarded is that it focuses across the entire life cycle. So development efforts can be guided by RMM, operational efforts can be guided by RMM, and you can see there that it goes from everything from planning to deploying to operating to retiring. Whereas perhaps some of these other models that are plotted on here, like CMMI for development or acquisition, really only cover part of the total life cycle.